We are going to be going over some Commander deck builder mistakes that I have made and exactly how I would fix them. Guys, welcome to the video. My name is Jack Talks MTG and I make Commander content for noobs like you. Today, as I said, we are going to be going over 3 of my decks. This would be a fun video that I thought I could share with you guys because there's some issues with these decks that I've been really wanting to fix. So I thought instead of just doing it in my own time, I thought I would document sort of the process and then maybe you guys can learn from the mistakes that I've made. So yeah, if that sounds good to you, stay tuned and we'll get straight into these decks. Okay, so the first deck we're going to be looking at here is my very first deck that I ever had, and that was my Pirates deck, my Ahoy Mateys Precon. Now, if you are familiar with the deck, you will probably notice that this deck is fairly different from the Precon. It's my most upgraded deck, I would say. The first things first that I want to talk to you about is that for all 3 of my decks today, I have gone through every single one of them and I have recategorized every single card in the deck. Now, I highly recommend that you guys all do this when you're building decks, especially if you're doing it online on Archidect and Moxfield and stuff like that. I don't use Moxfield, so I don't know if you can do it on Moxfield, but I'm sure you probably can. But if not, that's another reason to use Archidect. But what I'm talking about here, just so I can show you guys. So let's say we click on my commander here, Animal Brass, right? So you can see that it's got these 3 categories here. It's got Commander, it's got Graveyard Fill, and Reanimate, right? And you can make as many of these categories as you like, and it allows you basically to just sort through your deck so that you can see exactly of how many of each card that you have that is doing a certain job that you need, right? So we can see here, Brass, she is filling the Commander role, obviously. And then she's got Graveyard Fill, so she fills my graveyard because she mills cards, and she reanimates due to her second ability. And because this deck is built primarily around Admiral Brass, I wanted to make sure I have these categories. So I have cards that I know is filling my graveyard and make sure that I've got enough and stuff like that. Why this is so good, right? If you come up here, group by type, click on categories multiple, and now you can see that it's sorted all the cards into categories. Most cards will fall under more than one category, so it doesn't work to just put them in one, right? Because a card could be a removal spell and a card draw spell, right? Or a graveyard fill and a reanimation card. If we're doing this in person, we can't put a card in one pile and then the same card in another pile unless we have another copy. So this way allows you to do it and see it all. So I can see when looking at this deck that I have, for example, 4 cards that reanimate. Now for a reanimation deck, this isn't a lot. You know, it's just not. It's not ideal. So that could be like an area to improve upon, right? I can see I've got 13 card draw spells, which is nice. I've got 15 removal spells. Nice. So I've got my veggie numbers, right? Ramp, I've got even more. 19 cards with ramp, right? So we know that we've got quite a few of those as well. So what is the problem with this deck primarily? Well, for me, what I wanted to do, this is true for 2 of my decks. One, it's more of a problem, not so much for this deck, but just in general, I wanted to start building my decks more in a way that did not lean and rely so much on my commander. So I wanted to put more cards in that basically the deck is going to pop off whether the commander is on the field or not. Field? We're not talking about Yu-Gi-Oh! Ignore these cards in the maybe board. These were some other cards that I would like to add to the deck, but we're going to ignore those today. We're just going to focus on, because I didn't want to do adding too many things. I don't want to confuse this video too much. So the best thing to not be overwhelmed when you're deck building is just pick one thing, right? Pick one thing and then try to work on that. So for this, I want my thing is to add cards that are going to function very well without the commander. It means that if the commander's not on the field, the deck is still going to run well. So what cards do we have here, right? So we've got Haunting Voyage for our first card. This is a reanimation spell. It's also a creature type cares cards, and I wanted to add a bit more of those in because this is a creature tribal deck. And essentially this allows me to revive 2 of my pirates from the battlefield, or revive them all if I foretell it, which is fantastic. On top of this, this is a flavor win. The name of the card is Haunting Voyage. It's got a guy on a big boat, right? The fact that this card was not in this precon is criminal, right? Unless this card was maybe a recent release or released after, I don't really know. Point is, I need this card in my deck. It needs to be in there. Kindred Charge, again, another creature type cares cards. And this card basically creates a copy of every card that I have of that creature type. This card wins games, right? I don't need brass on the field. If I've got a few pirates, I slap this down. Woo! I'm going to be in a very nice position. This combos very well with other triggered abilities that I have, like Coercive Recruiter. Every time a pirate enters, steal something. Well, you play this, 4 pirates enter, I steal 4 things. It is very nice. Kindred Discovery, again, I've got a few creature type cares ones here. Kindred Discovery allows me to draw cards whenever a pirate essentially attacks or enters the battlefield. It's quite expensive, but it's a very, very nice payoff. It's going to mean that, you know, the deck does not lose momentum later in the game. So, yeah, I did want to add a bit more card draw in the deck as well, because a lot of my card draw, I realized, was coming from some Explore cards. And Explore's not really a reliable card draw engine because it only gets you lands in your hand. So, yeah. Right. Pirated Copy is a beautiful, beautiful card. This is a pirate card, for one. It's a card draw spell, and it creates a copy of anything on the battlefield. So, you know, if my opponent has something like ridiculously powerful, I just play Pirate Copy. Now I have a copy of it. Very, very nice. Or if I want, I can copy my other stuff like my Coercive Recruiter so that I can double up on some really nasty abilities, or my Port Razor, another one of my win cons. So, yeah. Next one, we got Strionic Resonator. This is a card that I wanted to add because basically I really like roaming throne in the deck, and I thought it'd be really funny to have another one of those because I can just keep triggering Brass, keep triggering Coercive Recruiter, Port Razor, all these really powerful abilities, and just do them again, you know, and that sounds like fun. So, yes, and the last card was a card that was originally in the precon. I took it out. I'm starting to realize I want to bring it back in. And that was the Grim Captain's Locker. I took this out because when I was playing with it and drawing it in the precon, it was just too slow. It wasn't really doing anything. And if I've been brutally honest, I couldn't really wrap my head around Escape. It just hurt my brain every time I read it. And I was just like, oh, you know what? I'd just rather take this out. Now I know what it does. And yeah, I think it was a bit silly because it's one of the only reanimation cards that came in this precon. So it needs to come back in, guys. And flavor-wise, it needs to come back in. So in terms of cards to take out, I have put a little red tag on some cards that I would like to take out, okay? If you don't know how to do this, I'll show you. We'll just go onto, like here, Starfleet Ravager, click this, and then on this color options here, you can assign them a color. So I've put on red. So, yeah, that's how you do it. So what cards have I tagged to take out? So some of these, like, Explore cards that were in there for Graveyard Fill, because I did want those in there. And I still do want Graveyard Fill cards in the deck. But if we look for Graveyard Fill as a category, I've got 16. So I've got a fair few. And, you know, stuff like Deadeye Tracker, which is a 1-drop, which is nice. It's a bit of graveyard hate, but it's not doing much. Not really enough to, you know, hold a spot in the deck. If it's only doing Graveyard Fill, there's no room for it. You know, I can have stuff that is filling my graveyard and doing other stuff at the same time. Malcolm is another one where it's like, it's a nice card, but the reality is I'm never really getting enough chorus counters in a game to trigger its second ability. Subterranean Schooner, the same thing as the Deadeye Tracker. So a lot of those cards where they're just Graveyard Fill, I am taking those out most likely. And then, actually, I'm going to go into type here, so we're not actually just looking at repeated cards. And then the Signets as well. They're a bit slow. And I'd rather just put more treasure stuff in the deck to ramp. We have got a lot of ramp, so I'm intrigued to see if the deck can function without the Signets. Because we do have a 5-cost commander, so you know, 2 mana rocks aren't the best if you have 5 mana commander, because really we want to be ramping on 3 to get our commander on 4. So yeah, it doesn't work so well. But you know, this isn't set in stone. This is just something that I would try out. very hard to make changes in this deck. Very hard, I'll be honest. Like, I love every card in this deck, so it's super, super hard to make changes at this point. But yeah, right, moving on. The next deck we have is my Ygra deck. Now, this was a big boy that we really needed to make some changes. So with this deck, this is my first deck I ever made from scratch. And when I first made this deck, I was just like, I just want loads of creatures that do stuff when they die or care about things when they die. The problem is that Ygra was like my main sack outlet, and if Ygra's not on the board, this deck just does nothing. Straight up. It does nothing because there's not enough sack outlets and stuff like that. Now, my first thought was get more sack outlets. The issue is that I've put a load of cards here that only work when Ygra's on the board, like the Bloomborough Squirrels, for example. Now, I wanted to include them because I wanted this to be a Bloomborough deck for flavor reasons, for fun. I didn't want this to just be purely about sacrifice. So now I'm starting to think, hey, maybe I make this more around food, because then the squirrels work in the deck if Ygra's on the field or not. If I need Ygra to make everything a food, to make the squirrels useful, then they just... too many cards. Like, I've got, let's have a look how many like sort of squirrel stuff I've got in here, because I have made that a category. Squirrel, 7 cards. So essentially 7 cards in this deck are now useless unless Ygra's on the board, and I hate that. I don't want that. You know, it's bad deck building. So in the maybe board, I have basically put a load of cards in here that care about food, right? They all do something. Rather, they create food or they care about food. And with those cards, if we look, I've made a category for food. I've got 12 here, right? So there's 13 cards in a maybe board. 2 of these don't do anything with food. But the number is going to go up to 20, which is a nice number. It's a nice number. 20 cards that create food and stuff. Yeah, the deck's going to feel a little bit more consistent with food. If it's built more around food, then the deck relies on Ygra a little bit less. So if Ygra isn't aboard, it has that ability still to one-shot people with her. But at the same time, if she's not, I can still play it as a food deck and have a lot of fun with some other cards in the deck. So yeah, I'm not going to go through each individual of these cards because I think this video may be too long if I do. But you know, I've got a Bloomborough Squirrel in here. I've got the Shire Land from Lord of the Rings. I do have a Life Gains Cares creature as well, because again, I wanted more creatures that if Ygra's not on the board, I've got some more like kind of bomby creatures. So this Sproutback Trudge is, I can essentially cast it for very, very cheap if I've gained enough life, and because with all the new food stuff, I'm probably going to be gaining a lot more life, so I liked this addition. Yeah, we got 2 Pippins, because we got to get Pippins in here. We got to get the Pippins in here. Gilded Goose, very nice commander card. Yeah. Oh, and Feast and Troll King's another nice little thing. Other than food, I just found this card, Whisper Silk Cloak. When I was building this deck, I wanted to put in cards that would make Ygra unblockable. This does that and gives her Shroud, and I was like, why is this card not in the deck? That is an absolute crime, okay? And then I got Well of the Lost Dreams for card draw. So yeah, that is my Ygra deck. That's how I would change it. In terms of what I would take out, I've just taken a lot of stuff out that is basically just does stuff when they die, because I'm trying to come away from that and go more into, you can see here, all of the red is die, cares, and dies, right? That's the main thing we're taking out. Yeah, because I want to come away from that sort of theme. But yeah, I will try this deck. I will see it if it works. If it doesn't, and I kind of want to go back to the original idea, I can do that. That's the beautiful thing about deck building. Nothing is permanent, guys. Don't be scared to make changes and like, I ruined the deck, especially if you've got your deck online, because then you've got the deck list. You just chuck all the cards back to normal. So yeah, right. Last deck we're going to be looking at is Wildsear. This was a lot easier for my changes at the moment, because for now, I had a huge issue, and that issue was I had way too much ramp, right? Because when I basically had one issue where I didn't have enough ramp, and I had all these high cost cards, didn't have enough ramp to cast them, and it felt really bad. So I just went too much in the other way. I just put so much ramp in here, and this is 22 ramp that are actual ramp cards, not like that are creating treasure tokens. So there's just too much ramp, and I was playing in the deck, and I had all this mana and nothing to do with it. So essentially, I would take out quite a few ramp cards, and then I wanted to put in some more impulse draw cards. Why impulse draw? Because I wanted to get some more red cards in here, and I like the idea. It fits the theme of the chaos of the cascade, revealing cards from the top of your library. It just fits. So most of these cards are impulse draw cards. We've got Enduring Courage here is a card I still need to add, which is a nice enchantment creature which gives stuff haste, so that just works well in the deck. Lelia here. This is such a nice card. Definitely works so well with not Ygra, Wildsear, because she cares about when you exile cards. We're going to be exiling loads of cards with Cascade. And then she also impulse draws me, so she was a no-brainer. We've got Luca here. Love the artwork on this card. The first time I saw this Planeswalker, I was like, I need to get a deck that I can put this in. And then I realized this works so well in Wildsear. Yes, Luca does impulse draw me, among other things. So I would just take out the Planeswalker that's already in here, Domri, for Luca. And then you've got the Seasons. Those cards are so good. If you don't know what they do, then go look at them. They're great. I'm not going to go for them. They do multiple things, but card draw is on both of these, whether impulse or normal, and amongst other things. So these two need to go in the deck as well. And yeah, those are my changes. So that is how I would fix all of my decks. So guys, if you take anything from this video, go through all your decks, categorize every single card, right? Go through them all individually, click on the card, look at what they do. Okay, Wolverine makes counters, okay? This is kind of a bad example. It doesn't have that many categories. But Warstorm Surge, let's have a look at this. It's removal, it goes in there, but it's also burn, it's also an enchantment, which we want to count our enchantments for Wildsear. So on, so on, so on. Just go through them all. It is an absolute game changer, and then you can specifically go on Scryfall, use the syntax, and find exactly what you need for the deck. And yeah, that's going to up your deck building game. Hopefully this video helped you guys with your deck building, fixing any deck building issues. Let me know in the comments below if you found this video useful. And if you want a more in-depth Commander deck building guide, then go check out this video here.